the end of the path is when you die, right? In this lifetime. And so you might as well walk a path with heart so that you enjoy the walking. And there's something about that familiarity with your own death that is very liberating, because it's like the bigger picture here is not what I'm doing now, but it's like, what am I getting from this lifetime in terms of experiences and contribution and lessons and things like that. And then it's really, for the evolution of the soul, it's the aggregate of all the lifetimes and all the lessons. So then there's not so much pressure on one thing or another. And I also, I've spent a lot of time looking into the contracts and agreements of what we are signing up to experience. And so if I'm going through a challenge, then I can only assume that I've placed it here for my own benefit, and that it's leading to some sort of miracle. And when you can view everything as a miracle unfolding, then it's not so, like, you can ride out the ups and downs of it a little bit more easily.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Crypto Freedom Academy podcast episode. I'm your host, Oto Gomes, and I'm very excited to bring in this new guest. And this is my first episode back after a long time of not being here. So thank you guys for your patience. But this person, his name is Derek Loudermilk. He has coached global influencers, leading scientists, cutting edge entrepreneurs, billionaires, world record athletes, thought leaders, NYT best-selling authors, and high achievers around the world for more than 18 years. His work has been featured in over 100 publications and podcasts globally. Since 2018, Derek has facilitated the League of Superconductors, the world's first quantum business mastermind. Thank you, Derek. I really appreciate your time, your energy here to share your experience and your life story with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I am excited to hang out with you because a while back I was like, oh, I should totally get Otto on my show, and then for some reason it didn't happen. And what luck that we re-encounter each other again in a slightly new context.
I feel like if you're doing the work, and you start to connect with others that are doing this work, the big work, either whether that's like journey of self or this matrix thing, it's a small group. It's a small little group of people that are really willing to, at least right now, it's a smaller group right now. And so it was bound to happen that we're going to circle back in each other's circles.
Yeah, I was just listening to the May 2024 energy updates. I like to tune into those at the beginning of the month. And multiple people were saying this is the month where sort of the freedom, sovereignty stuff takes on larger awareness in the sort of general population. And I was like, oh, perfect timing.
Energetically, based on astrology?
Exactly. Astrology and psychic predictions and what people are perceiving sort of remotely.
Man, it's funny you say that, because for a long time, I knew about astrology. I knew the effects that the astrological alignments have on us as human beings. But I always had this firm belief, like, well, but I'm the alchemizer of this reality. I can create the reality I want, which is true. And there is a collective effect that astrology has on us, and we need to be aware of it, because that's I feel like that's a part of the program,
co-creating,
like how that affects our program
with the stars.
With the stars, yes. We got to become our own star, right? So the reason I wanted to get you on here, I became a part of this smaller group. Those who are listening, I became a part of this smaller group on Telegram, and I've seen that they're on the journey of actually practically doing the work. And I've been able to read through a bunch of the comments and see that these individuals are doing it. They're actually going through it and having a human experience, having a man or woman experience as they're going through it. And I think that's so powerful. As I was watching it, I realized for myself, okay, well, once I get down that path, this is a possibility. There's a possibility I'm going to feel this way. So this is where Derek and I reconnected, and I watched one of your videos in that group, and I was like, man, I got to get this guy on my podcast to talk about his experience and what he's going through. So before we go down that road, I want to know more about you and your journey to this point. So my question to you is, what was the red pill moment that kind of shook you out of the matrix reality and started bringing you down this path?
Yeah, well, I actually just finished last year a 7-year metaphysical quest. So I'm actually coming at this from the spiritual metaphysical side of things. And that started because I was traveling the world as the digital nomad, and I was going to sacred sites and sitting with shamans and gurus in different tribes and just having wild, magical, non-ordinary reality type experiences. And I started, researching what are the mechanics of those supernatural experiences. Can I study and replicate them? And I was actually in a phase where I was studying magic words when I got into the legal side of things, because I was coming at it from, words. They have a vibration. Each part of the word has its own sound, tone, vibration, and it's really cool because you're essentially creating something physical from nothing when you make a sound. It's a very sort of godlike creator moment when you just speak a word into existence. And there's a lot of magic to words. And I began to discover that the legal system uses a lot of magic words. And I thought, oh, that's so fascinating that they can influence reality through their use of words and definitions. And then that's when I started looking into just legal structures and banking structures that had been in play for actually thousands of years in order to manipulate the course of humanity, and discovered that's actually still going on here in my country, in the United States. And wow, isn't that interesting? And you and I, it sounds like, both got in touch with Robert Michael pretty early on, a few years ago. And then I became aware of, the birth certificates and the ens legis legal fiction and the difference between living and dead and maritime law and all these concepts that I had never bothered to give any attention to because I don't know, it was irrelevant. And I came back to it and I was like, well, that's interesting. I learned a lot. We were planning on building a community, buying some land and building a village. And, I was like, okay, we're going to have a private member organization, or maybe it's like going to be a religious nonprofit. And we were kind of looking at that. But I didn't see the applications of it for individuals right away until my son was born last summer. And then the question came up, should I get him a birth certificate? Should I send in the live birth documentations for the state issued birth certificate? And I was like, are there benefits that I'd be giving up without it, or are there freedoms that I would be giving up if we avoid that? So that was kind of what led me to dive deeper, was just that. And we still haven't, I think I will, but I still haven't got around to just sending it off to the state. So he doesn't have a state issued birth certificate at this point, 10 months old, but the other two kids, they do.
Is there just to pull on that thread? Is there benefits to? I guess the benefits lie in the public sector legislation, right? Not necessarily as a human, as like a physical man or woman.
Yeah, the birth certificate has bonds and contracts that go with it that you could access and utilize for your benefit. I think. Yeah. And I think all this stuff, it's not dangerous if you know how to take advantage of it and be the administrator and, wearing the proper hat and knowing how to get the stuff done that you want done.
Yeah, yeah. It's so let's talk about that. I've tried. I feel like I got to a point where I really I'm fully understanding the theory, or like not the theory, but the embodiment side of it, like the perspective that you need to really embody it. And I've boiled it down to a loss of identity, where most people are not identifying with their physical body; they're identifying with something outside of themselves, usually the ID, right? Your picture with the name on it, and therefore, because of that identity, they feel the pressures, they feel the fear that that system puts out. But what's your perspective? Like, what is the pivotal? Like, what is necessary for someone to really embody it?
Yeah, and what it sounds like you're speaking to is this process of unwinding and digesting the the construct and understanding like where our place is in the legal and banking constructs that have been erected over the past millennia and in the United States 100 years or so.
Yeah.
And you're speaking about the all caps name or the ins legis or the straw man, which is that sort of fictionalized entity, that commercial entity that has the same name as you. And this is why it's so confusing for people, because when you see the billing statements arrive addressed to the all caps Derek Loudermilk or Oto Gomes, you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. I'm on the hook for that. But it's a totally separate entity of which you are the beneficial owner of. And it's actually a beautiful system in a way, because we are the beneficial owners. We're like the heirs to the kingdom of heaven, or however you want to put it. But we just don't know it. And so it's this process of realizing like what people go through on the spiritual side is like, oh my gosh, I'm actually a fractal of divinity. Well, what does that mean in terms of like my bills? And what does that mean in terms of like how I interact in society and with the government and all this stuff? It's like everything arises through the life force of the living creatures, right? And because we're humans and we've created this human system, like everything has to flow through us. So it's not that we owe the debt. It's like we're the originators of the power, the life force, the wealth in the first place. And so you really have to think of the whole system as flipped in a lot of ways, because instead of us owing all the money and the taxes, essentially we have unlimited credit that we bestowed upon the ourselves and the benefit of the government. But nobody really knows this. And when you start interacting with people at the banks, they don't know it as much as we don't know it. And so they have this presupposition of like, oh, you're supposed to pay your bill, but it turns out there's actually no money. They took away the gold and the silver, so there's no money, so you can't actually pay for anything. So
There's no paying. There's no paying. Yeah, yeah.
the only option we have is to discharge the debt with more debt. And yeah, it's such a funny thing, but it's a process of like releasing what you thought you knew and digesting it through your body. Um, Sometimes it takes just a day to shift your belief, and sometimes it can take weeks to really know who you are in some sense.
Oof. And it's funny because in the beginning I mentioned about the work, and talking, and I kind of divided them both, like this inner work to this matrix thing, but it's the same thing. Robert Michael was the first one that told me. He said, you can do all the paperwork, you can do all the structuring, all the right legal things you're supposed to do, but if you don't know how to embody it, or if you're not embodied in it, then you'll get sucked back in. You'll get trapped back in, or self-implicated back in.
Yeah. And when you talk about the matrix, there's actually, sort of matrices within matrices, so to speak. There's like the physical reality matrix, which we're co-creating in this unified field, like how we all experience walking on this earth, this plane of existence. And then within that plane of existence, there's the banking legal matrix, which has been created, so it's just like, again, it's a fractalized multi-layer sort of construct.
Yeah, it was a podcast that I heard recently between Alec Zeck and Brandon Williams, I think.
Brandon Joe Williams, yeah.
He's the one stupid fuck. I'm just gonna say right now, the way that he structured his website and his course and even the videos themselves is so refreshing. It's not for kids probably because of the cursing, but it's so honest and so direct. I really enjoy it. And he said on the podcast, which I thought was really interesting, he was talking about oh, I lost the topic. I lost the
Naturalization.
Yes.
Is that the
yes,
one? Yeah.
Yes. What is like? Can you did you fully understand that? Because it's still hard for me to click into exactly what he was saying. Because he was saying
Yeah.
that.
So this is so funny because
Yeah, go ahead.
he was speaking about how it took him 2 months to understand what exactly it meant. This definition of to naturalize, to confer nationality upon oneself by any means. And it's such a simple definition. I think there's maybe a little bit more, but it's basically the crux of it is like, it doesn't matter how you say what nationality you are, you can just do it. And that means you could change it multiple times throughout the day. Like you could change it, like you could change your outfits, right? You could just reconfer a different nationality just by you saying so. And they were talking about who is obligated to pay taxes. So imagine you are in France, touring Paris, and the gendarme come up to you and they're like, "You owe us taxes," and you're like, "I'm not French. I don't owe you taxes." If you realize that you don't owe taxes to the United States because you're actually not a United States citizen by birth, but you've been naturalized into it by these implicit agreements, such as taking on a social security card or birth certificate or driver's license, you have sort of naturalized yourself to declare that you are a U.S. citizen, when in reality, most people should be classified as American nationals or state nationals of the Republic. So here's the main difference, and the entity called U.S. citizen was introduced after the Civil War in the 14th Amendment for the freed slaves. And so basically they were like, well, we need to give them some categorization that's mostly the same as other people, but still not quite, to try to appease the Southerners. So they came up with this U.S. citizen categorization, which is different than the National Republic citizen. And U.S. citizens are the ones obligated to pay taxes. But most people shouldn't be paying taxes because they shouldn't be U.S. citizens, but we've all unknowingly naturalized ourselves to become U.S. citizens. But you can easily undo it just by saying, I'm actually not a citizen of the United States. I'm a Missourian. And then you're back. You've just changed your nationality again. And it's just, you can just do it, bing, and you're done.
Does that, so is it just you have to like give a notice, like you give a statement out, maybe on social media? Can I do that on social media?
Yeah, I mean, somebody has to, I suppose it's kind of the same with the trans thing. If like somebody has to acknowledge it, if you're like, I'm actually the other sex now, and everyone's like, yeah, sure, whatever. But if someone is like, nope, not to me, you're not. And then you're in some sort of disagreement. You're like, well, yes, I am. So if I was like, I'm not a U.S. citizen, and then someone was like, according to me, you are, and then you'd be like, well, I guess I have to prove it to you in some way that you acknowledge it formally. Then there's, again, the paperwork that can be done. And there's a few processes to do that. One is just getting a letter from the Department of Homeland Security that says, basically, we have no records of your citizenship. And you can use that for your documentation, like when you're applying for a passport or to reissue your social security card, for example. So basically an affidavit is something where you swear to a fact of something, and then that is the fact unless somebody can prove it otherwise. So there's the affidavit route, but the other route, you could prove that you're not a U.S. citizen and therefore prove that you're not obligated to, let's say, pay taxes or go to war on behalf of the United States, is that you could get a document from the Department of Homeland Security where they say, we don't have any records of your citizenship. And you could use that as a foundational document to issue a passport or reissue a social security card or something like that. And just, I don't think we've specified it yet so far, but the United States is different than the United States of America. The United States of America is a constitutional republic, and the United States is a corporation, a for-profit corporation that's owned by the British monarchy, copyrighted by the British monarchy.
Would you say that republic is another word for like assembly of men and women, where their thing is a fictional body, right? Something that they created to do business.
Yeah, yeah. The Republic, at the very beginning of the Constitution, it says, "We, the people of the United States." So it's basically saying like the people are the nation. The living men and women are the nation of the United States. It's not necessarily the land that we're upon. It's us together is the nation.
That makes way more sense to me for sure. Um, Let me ask you this other question. What the process? So we've all, at least the people that I've in my audience, in my community, we've heard of discharging. There's no pain, there's no real money. I talk about this in my academy often, that the monetary system it's all negotiable instruments. It's debt instruments. So the discharge process that I had thought was the way to do it is not the way. Since I've learned from this community, because I saw something recently about a medallion you got to get, and it really started to restructure in my mind the process because of the way that you guys are doing it. But if you can, I don't know if you can clear that up for me. What is that process, and have you done it yet? What's your experience?
Yeah, this is a very hopeful and frustrating at the same time aspect. Everybody is discharging already when they use their Federal Reserve notes. So it's just, and those, right, are negotiable instruments. Those are promissory notes. And so, but if you try to use a different negotiable promissory note, it sort of short circuits the payment processing centers, the credit cards, or someone will say you need to pay in U.S. currency. Well, like, this is a U.S. currency. Like, look up the definition. And so we were running into a lot of trouble with them actually following the laws that they're under. They just kind of short circuit. I think it's mostly incompetence rather than an intent to harm or frustrate. But the basically once you know the law, you can try to use it to properly discharge any debts that are created. And the U.S. Congress has laid out exactly how this is supposed to be done. The laws are very clear. You could read them and apply them. But then if somebody doesn't do that, then you basically have to make them follow the law. And then you're getting into, well, who can make someone follow the law? Is it going to be the FBI or the Securities Exchange Commission, or is it going to be the Treasury, the Secretary of the Treasury, or what organization can actually back me up and force a banking institution to follow the law properly? And then what law are they bound by? Are they following the Constitution, or are they sort of following their own laws? And it turns out most of the banking system is following the Uniform Commercial Code laws, which are adopted by all of the commercial states and the commercial United States. So it can get very sort of multi-layered and convoluted. And I have sort of experienced discharge of credit cards and car loans, only to have them reversed at a later time. And I believe perhaps that's coming from the higher ups at the bank trying to strategically avoid the collapse of their system, like prolonging the collapse of the triple dipping fraudulent system.
Do you see that changing? Do you see them becoming, like, if they get overwhelmed with requests, they'll have to just bend to it, or is it that you think that's something that's going to just
It's going to change. I
implode
don't know
with
exactly
them?
the leverage point that's going to make it change. Either it will be nobody's paying their bills, or it'll be too many litigations, or it'll just be this mass awareness that the whole system is based on fraud. I'm not sure what's going to shift things the fastest, but I suppose as soon as some litigation becomes public and they're forced to comply, then everyone's just going to jump on the bandwagon.
Precedent. Yeah, that's what they love. That's what that system loves, is precedent and not thinking critically in the moment. um, you mentioned earlier about, we are the ones that, like, you said it actually very well, about that everything is flowing through us. And so I don't know if you can break down what it means that we are the creditor to the system. Like, what does it actually mean? The example I usually give to my students is when you go to the bank and you sign your name and you're asking for a certain amount of money, they take that as the collateral or security, and that's when they're not actually reaching into their own pockets or getting somebody else's money that deposit into their bank, but they're actually printing new money, and then giving it to you with the responsibility of paying back them with interest. So, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's definitely blew my mind when I sort of realized it. Um, there's from the life force side of things, it's like what causes us to be moving around in a body in the first place? Like how are we even animated? And it's only moving bodies that can build a physical thing or create a product or do commerce. So all of the wealth in the physical world is created by people just making it. It's the creative force that makes all these things. So that's one aspect, is that right, the GDP just comes from the people's actions, and then on the monetary side, yeah. So when you take out a mortgage, or not take out a mortgage, when you create a mortgage note, um, that has cash value. So you start by bringing the cash to them, and then it flows from there. Like your signature creates the cash, and that cash goes into the system, moving around, electronically on the books, on the ledgers. And yeah, when I realized that the banks they don't have any money to loan, they are just purchasing the securities that people create. Like they're not allowed to loan money according to the law, and what their business model is to buy securities. And so you are the source of the securities that they're buying.
Just stuff blows my mind every time I hear somebody else's perspective on it. It's so interesting, this situation that we're all in. I guess my next question is, so you mentioned that you've tried the discharging of credit cards. You mentioned you tried the discharging of vehicle. Did you had any other experiences so far, or are those the only two?
One thing that I kind of really get a lot of joy out of is I'm no longer driving with state issued plates. And because we were talking about, what is the Republic and what is the United States versus United States of America, they're different. So they each have different jurisdictions. And so the jurisdiction of the DMV is this sort of commercial jurisdiction. Actually, the definition of motor vehicle, so Department of Motor Vehicle, definition of motor vehicle is a commercial, essentially for-profit vehicle. And so if you want to be private, then that's an automobile. So there's just different definitions, same vehicles essentially. But when you're signing up for the DMV, you're essentially becoming like a de facto employee of the state of Missouri. Mm-hmm. And then you fall under corporate statutes, which are the sort of laws that allow them to fine you for a taillight, or even pull over a black person and beat them up, or whatever it may be, right? Mm-hmm. And so I realized I don't really necessarily want to be in that jurisdiction. So I've got Department of Transportation Federal Republic jurisdiction plates on my car now. And I've talked to other people that have this, and they're not, they can be speeding and playing loud music, and Brandon Joe Williams has talked about this, and it's kind of a gleeful thing to realize, like, your corporate laws don't apply to me because I'm not a public entity. I'm a private person, just
Traveling.
they talk about traveling. I think if you were in a traffic stop and you were like, I'm just traveling, they'd be like, yeah, whatever. But if you were like, hey, this is private, I have my private insurance, and if you want to continue with this traffic stop, I have a fee for interacting with you, and
Tell
that's,
me more. So tell me more about that. Do you have like a document that you hand over and you say,
I do. Yep.
you don't have to respond or sign this to agree, right?
Yeah, basically say, it's $10,000 a minute if you'd like to detain me, and you can be like, what's your badge number? But essentially, they know that they don't have jurisdiction because you're not presenting them with the plates or the driver's license, which link you to essentially putting yourself in their jurisdiction.
Is there a limit to that? Like, so if let's say they go through the process of like maybe the person is upset, they get angry, and they take you out of your car and they bring you to jail. Is the police department in trouble, or is it just the individual that's in trouble? And how far does that go?
Yeah, I think you could go after their bonds. They're like um, unlawful personal damage bonds. I think you could sue the department and the individual and get a lot of money for unlawful arrest or something like that. The sheriff's department and the marshals are the ones who, if there was a road crime and you were under a DOT jurisdiction, federal transit jurisdiction, and you injured someone, then it would be the sheriffs or the marshals who would be called in instead of the police.
Gotcha. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. So the police, they only take care of legislative complaints.
Yep,
rather-
they're the corporate statute arm of law enforcement, policy enforcers, right? Police policy enforcers.
So then the sheriffs are brought in when there is a claim, when it's like a property or a damage, or like you hurt someone. That's the sheriff's.
As I understand it, it's like their jurisdiction is when, I guess, the police are involved in actual crime. So crime has a very specific definition as well. There has to be a living victim, right? So speeding on an empty road, or the taillight out thing, like there's no victim, there's no living person who's being victimized, so there's actually no crime. So some people get cases thrown out of court because please produce the victimized party, and they can't. And that comes from essentially common law, which is very ancient system of laws.
Actually, I was able to get a very good, clear picture of the layering of, law, land, air, sea, trust law. Or actually, I think Brandon was talking about that there is the esoteric above the trust law, and then there's trust law, and then there is contract law, and then you got the three breakdowns, right? Common law, law of the land, and then there's maritime law, which is essentially all the chaos. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if you think about the unfolding of modern human history in the last, say, 5,000-6,000 years, and how power and control systems would be developed, but also just people would be trading, and they would need ways of adjudicating disputes, quickly. Usually, like in a port, we need to know who owns this goods, because both these boats are leaving, like, whose stuff is this, right? And they need a quick way to just solving it. So there's a lot of useful applications, but of course there are people with incentives to manipulate systems to their own advantage. And then those powerful people sort of leave these constructs in their wake, and everyone's inadvertently like entered into this centuries old sort of debt slave mechanism.
It's a lot of ancestral trauma. I feel like most people that I've spoken to in my life have a hard time even talking about it because they have this feeling of shame. Like, how can you not pay that back? You took a loan. How dare you? Or like, the patriotic individual that is, I am a US citizen. What are you talking about? God bless America. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's funny how there's this like friction that happens because of something emotional. From where? Is it your experience? Is there something, from ancestors?
Yeah, for sure. And I think we all have this sense of honor. Like
Yeah.
if I get something, if I hire a guy to work on my deck, I I believe he deserves to be paid for his work, right? Every person is worthy of their labors, and I think that that's where this comes from. And but we want to have this reciprocal payment thing so that we're all remaining honorable and in good faith with each other. But that ability has been stripped of us. So we actually can't like do it in the Constitution says, right, money is gold and silver, but there's no gold and silver to use, so we can't do it. Sorry. Um, so yeah, we all have this awareness of fairness and honor and reciprocity and all these things, and yet we find ourselves in a system that has veiled our use of this. And for sure, there is a lot of things that can carry between lifetimes, according to my research. Things that actually are people are incarnating right now to resolve these very traumas relating to money, war, slavery, oppression. All of these things are being processed through by the people alive now. And it's a hard road, right? It can be physically demanding. It can be emotional. Probably the first 5 years of me, my relationship with my wife, I saw her go through all these stages of processing, essentially because she became a stay-at-home mom, but she had been working since she was 14. She'd been slaving away essentially in minimum wage jobs since she was a kid, and just releasing all this lifetime trauma from just being sort of worked to the bone to, ancestral lineage, like her mom and her mom's mom all had that same experience. Like they were forced to work multiple jobs and all these things. And what drives me in this whole process is one, I get a lot of channeled material from like the Pleiadians and the Arcturians and other more evolved societies, and you can go and you can tap into that consciousness and say, like, how do they run their society? How do they do it in a fair way that gets resources for everyone, that is a love-based system, etc.? And you can get a blueprint for it. And you can also look into our future using remote viewing techniques, which I train people in remote viewing. So what we do is we have our students look 50, 100, 200 years in the future. What does the world look like? Oh, wow, everyone has enough and they're living in these nice little communities, and we have, hover cars, and there's a lot of music and dancing and painting going on, and everyone has plenty of money. So great. To get us from here to there, what do we need to do this month? What do we need to do right now to create the structures that enable the world to look like that? And that's kind of like how I guide my steps, my process.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So talking about the future, let's talk a little bit about crypto and how you think that, because I know that this was a topic that we probably wanted to connect on initially, and then I started going down this road. But when it comes to money, right, we have money and then we have currency. And in my perspective, this is the first time that we actually are able to create real money where the value is coming out of us rather than a debt system. But what is your perspective? How does crypto kind of mesh into all of this?
Well, you have way more expertise on this than I do, but as I understand about Bitcoin, it's sort of a perfected ledger of, who owes who what, and that's kind of what the books of the bank are like. That's how they generate the fake money, is that they say like, okay, now we have this balance sheet, and we have some assets and we have some liabilities on it. And when we loan money, we're creating assets and liabilities, but there is actually nothing real here. Um, so I sort of see Bitcoin as just very functional, keeping track of that as like a perfected ledger. Um, and then I would I haven't dabbled a lot in the usage of other things, but like I was creating NFTs for a while. I was like, okay, I can see how that's kind of useful to to create NFTs. Or I think it's like V chain, tracking shipments and the movement of goods and things. Anything where you need a lot of precision, I see that as great benefit. But yeah, I'm sure there's way more philosophical and use case things that I have no clue about. You can probably tell that I'm pretty much
Sorry.
a newbie at crypto.
Well, I wanted to get your perspective because I feel like it's always nice to hear, others in a perspective of the space, and then how it meshes with their own expertise, with what it is that they're in alignment with. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Bitcoin, out of all, this is something I say to my community often: 99.9% of these projects that exist are going to go away because they're launching in the public sector globally and trying to combat the globalists, which is like, that's global level launching is their bread and butter. And Bitcoin is really one of the few that have already kind of been tested and tried and gone through the hurdles to be able to combat the attacks on it to get to this level where it's like a true storage of value. But yeah, I see sort of the same thing happening right now that you're saying, which what I've been practicing, or what I've been trying to practice is, or at least become aware of, is how can I bring this debt that is in this system, in the matrix system, and put it into possession-based assets, things that I can actually be in possession of. And Bitcoin being a digital physical, that was my go-to that I've learned that is the easiest, most liquid thing right now, hardest asset that exists. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to know your perspective on it. And are you invested into it, or have you gone into it a little deeper, or have you just kind of skimmed the surface?
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. Could you repeat that?
So I guess my question is, how deep have you gone into crypto? Have you just been skimming the surface and trying to see how it works, or have you already put some money into it? Have you tried to make money off of it?
Yeah, actually, this is so funny. I bought Bitcoin in 2014, and the people, I was in Bali at the time, and everyone was like, "This is a new currency," and I was like, "Cool, let me just practice spending it," because I think that's what you do with currency. So I bought a few $100s worth of Bitcoin, probably several Bitcoin, and spent them on food at local restaurants. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, but not that different than spending cash. So then, I probably had just $100 of Bitcoin sitting in my wallet at the time, and no idea what happened to that, but it's probably worth a lot more now. And then I sort of got into it with each cycle. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to learn a little bit more. I have a handful of currencies right now that I just sort of keep track of, and then whenever a new one comes out, there's like usually like little videos you can watch to learn about what they're for. And I'm a very casual observer of the space.
Yeah, it's a definitely an interesting space, and my own experience with something similar, because I got into the space in 2012 and started trading Bitcoin specifically, and started divest into other currencies that were available at the time, which was very minimal compared to now. When I first got in, there was maybe 20, maybe not even that. So it was they were really just copies of Bitcoin changed a little bit, really.
Mhm.
But I've gone down that road. I bought a TV one time for I don't know how many Bitcoin. I don't even want to say because then you do the math to see how much it is today, and you mind blowing. But it was a journey to be able to learn and go deeper into it. I have a question. So I've heard this a lot, and I'm trying to find someone that can more easily explain if this is real or not, and if it is, what is the process. But I've heard from several sources from people that I've spoken to about this that there is when we were talking about our name in capital letters being a trust that they control, right? That I think the trustee is the Federal Reserve or maybe the beneficiary. I'm not sure which one.
We're the beneficiary.
Is there an account there? Is there an account there with a bunch of money that I can access or currency that I can access, or no? Is that false?
Yeah. So let me see if I can explain it. Here's what I understand it to be. It's both an implicit trust. That is, there's no paperwork for the trust, but it is a trust, and it's also a corporate. What is the term? It's two things. It's like a corporate enterprise and a trust. That's the ens legis all caps name. And there are performance and payment bonds, which together form fidelity bonds, which match up with the birth certificate, the social security number, the driver's license, the marriage license, etc. And those can be drawn upon for the payment or discharge using negotiable instruments. Yep. And yeah, so the responsible party would be the trustee or the fiduciary to administer the liquidation of those bonds and the using those funds for payment of, to pay off your mortgage or your electricity bill or whatever. So that's the principal. When people talk about the principal, you're the principal, the living person that is the beneficiary, the secured party to these bond instruments.
So to be able to do this, though, you need to create your own trust, right? You need to create your own trust that you has an account that you have access to directly.
Yeah, I have a bunch of trusts. There's like an estate trust, which is the right. Estates are when somebody dies, and your ens legis is not living. It's a corporate fictional entity, so that would be in an estate trust. And then often there's a foreign trust and then a irrevocable trust that you're operating. All of these trusts together sort of form your checking, savings account, administrative accounts, etc. Yeah, right. So multiple trusts. You would have a foreign trust, an estate trust, an irrevocable living trust, and you would be administering those. They're each they would each have their own taxpayer identification with the IRS, and you would be moving your credit through those and processing payments and discharge through those trusts.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense. So you have to layer. So there is a structuring that happens here, right, to do it properly. It's not just like I'm just going to open up a trust and it's going to work.
Well, it can be that easy because trusts are really easy to make. You just say there's a trust and there is. It's like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's a little bit magic-y feeling, but then there's the role and the performance of the different positions. And that's kind of like, what hat are you wearing? You're like a company with a lot of different roles, and you're filling all the roles at different moments.
Is it so? I've used this analogy before, and correct me if I'm wrong in using it. Is it like birthing a baby, but there's no living body, and then it gets all the same benefits of being in that system without there being a physical body?
Well, there was a famous Supreme Court case that said like corporations and trusts and things can be people, can be persons, and that sort of established that these fictionalized things have the rights, same rights as persons. I'm still wrapping my head around exactly like what a trust is, but it's so funny whenever I tune in to like spirit guides or anything like that, they're always like, trust yourself, wink, 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 get into trust law. And it's like, okay.
Trust yourself.
Yeah,
Ah, right. Even like
they
that
do a
direct
lot of puns and
phrase,
jokes.
trust yourself.
Yeah. Um,
You break it down and bring it to the front. Your self trust.
I know the thing is, it's so fun with the definitions. We get back to the magic words. What does this word actually mean? Where does it come from? How's it used? And does it mean different things to different people? And so, yeah, that in these banking documents, like SEC filings, the first 10 pages are just definitions. Like, here's what we mean when we say this. And you're like, I didn't know that meant that. Wow. Who knew?
Well, what do you respond if a cop walks up to you and you're like at a park and they say, what's your name? Do you give them your name, or do you go,
Well, I
you need
haven't
to
I
sound
haven't
that
really had that encounter, but um strategically I would probably say, like, well, who wants to know? Or like, why are you asking? And then I might just give my first name. But what would probably happen, I'd fall into my programming and be like, oh, I'm Derek Loudermilk and I live at such and such address, and then be like, don't, you know, accidentally implicated myself with the wrong. So, I think there's like you you fall to the level of your training or your experience, right? So rehearsing some of this stuff, right? If you were going to go into court, you would probably want to script your things you would say and refer to that script. Yeah, I think if you were going to go into court, you would want to just script it out and make sure you didn't,
yeah.
because knowing that they're going to try to get you under the jurisdiction of the case, if you're in court, there's certain things that you would need to say, like, yes, I am the all caps name. Well, then the case has merit. Or if you were to argue the facts of the case, then you're sort of by implication admitting that you are under their jurisdiction and that you are the all caps name. And so to avoid that, you would have to sort of instead take the role of the questioner and being like, I'm here representing this all caps person, like what's going on? What is this court all about? And put on a different hat, so to speak, and not try to plead guilty or innocent for that matter, because then you're agreeing to their terms. You really want to approach it as if you were setting your own terms. But
Yeah.
I haven't been to court.
Yeah, that's good. That's a whole experience in and of itself. I have heard, I think it was from Robert Michael, that he said, oh, no, this was, do you know Greg Paul from Law of Mankind?
I don't.
Take it or leave it. Totally recommend watching it. He just explains, he's into the wording and word magic and how it correlates to law. And so he breaks down a bunch of words in his little course. Alex Zach actually has done some courses with him. But he said in his video, the one asking questions is the one that's really in control. When you're asking questions, that's when you're actually the one flowing the energy towards the direction you want to go.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've seen these hilarious videos where it's like people asking cops the same dumb questions that they ask us. So it's like someone going up to a cop and being like, "What are you doing? Have you been drinking?" Like,
I know what you're talking about. I love it. Yes.
And then it puts them on the back foot. They're like, "Wait, hold on a second.
I'm the
I
one.
don't have to answer to you."
But that's so true. It's human nature. And it's funny. I've felt too that it is a little bit human nature to want to answer, to want to be the one to have the answers. I don't know if that's a trauma, a collective trauma, but yes, it's actually, I've tried to practice this recently where I'm the one asking questions, and it's hard. It's hard, especially when you ask another question in return and then you're like, I want to answer now.
We play this game. I play this game with my kids. It's an improv game. It's the question game where you can only ask questions and then the other person must respond with a question. And it's like eventually you're like, wait, what did I say last time? Was that a question? And they're like, no, that, oh, dang it. Because we want to be helpful. Yeah, it's a fun one.
I'll say this. I'm an actor. I was an actor since I was really,
Ah,
and went to California for 5 years to pursue that. I actually did some work, and I took 2 years of Meisner training. The Meisner technique is all about it's the nonverbals. It's picking up on the nonverbals. The theme, the basic theme of the whole thing is what are they doing? How do I feel about it? That's basically what it is. But you're taking into account everything but the words, because in acting, right, we get a script, and like you have to say the words on the script, but we are as the actor in control of everything else. Like
mm,
how we say the words, what we're looking at, our mannerisms. So I feel like I got really well trained in picking up nonverbal cues and looking at the other 95% of communication. Um, and I've noticed that when you ask questions, you can get a lot of answer just by looking at that, by looking at nonverbals. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that I've been practicing that a lot, and there's a lot of communication that happens without them saying a word.
it's fun. I've been podcasting for 10 years now, and one of the first things I learned was just to shut up. And that sometimes the guest will answer a question, and then if you leave silence there, they will get into the good stuff. There's that uncomfortability of like, am I supposed to be talking some more? Maybe I'll just say some more stuff. And then that's when you get some of the juicy, good little bits. So yeah, just that, like, I'm just going to leave that silence out there and let you fill it.
Oh, you know it. I didn't know you've been podcasting that long. I've only been doing it for about 2.5 years now. Um,
Yeah, it was so funny. At the time, I was like, man, I'm late to the game, but I'm still going to do it just because I want to do it. And now everyone's like, oh, you were one of the originals. I was like, yeah, I guess so. But
Truly, truly. I started my interviewing on Instagram Lives. So it was like I had no editing, no nothing. It was just me asking questions and pulling on threads. And then I just started like, let me start an actual podcast where I'll just have a long conversation with someone. But I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot.
yeah, it's fun. It's good to hang out with
It
cool
is.
folks.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to connect and talk about this stuff. And I feel like the audience enjoys just being a fly on the wall and hearing a conversation. It's that new way of podcasting now. Um, Man, this is great. So tell me if you can just share from your perspective, what would be a first step to someone that wants to go down this road? I mentioned in the beginning the embodiment piece and really allowing yourself to shift that identity, which I think is a big part of it.
Hmm.
But from your perspective, yeah, what would you say is a good first step?
Yeah, there's also just a lot of, like we were talking about, definitions and laws to digest, to understand. I see it kind of like a game where if you're playing, and I like to play Catan, Settlers of Catan, um, to win at that, you can win in any way that you want, but you have to sort of know what strategy you want to employ, and someone else might be employing a totally different strategy than you, but you have to put the pieces together in the way that you want to win. So you have to know what the pieces are and how to utilize them. So that's kind of like the knowledge acquisition piece, the learning, and then there's the deprogramming piece and the emotional component of like seeing what you thought was true die off and then becoming this new embodied version of what you now see, and realizing that probably going to have multiple ego death experiences along the way. Um, and then there's the implementation of the laws and processes that you've learned in order to, like, what's more important to you, to stop paying taxes or to discharge your credit cards or to not be forced to do something. Like if a government were to try to mandate you to do something like stay in your house, if that was important, that you legally had the power to be free. So it kind of depends on what are your objectives and in what order, and then sort of go about building the legal foundation, right? That's going to stand up to someone challenging you on it, either on paper or verbally, right? If you have an interaction with someone, that you need to be able to know what you've done and why you have the authority and right to do what you're doing.
I love that. That's really well explained, the layers that is needed. And I guess it would depend on the individual where they're at, right? And where how they want to start the process, but they're all important. You need to be able to hit all of those. I have a question. I love your energy. I love how grounded you are when you're talking about this. What are your daily practices? What do you do on a daily basis to help, during those moments, if you were get to be confronted by an officer of the law or, a judge or something? What do you do for a daily practice?
Yeah. And I have a practice that I do with my kids. So we, um, like physical practices to change our internal state. So in the morning, we get up, we drink a lot of water, and then we go outside barefoot on the grass and we connect with the elements. I apprentice under a Mexican shaman, and so we give reciprocity and gratitude to the elements, which are earth, water, air, fire, and love. Love is ether, the central element, which connects all those things. And that only takes a couple of minutes. But then I have various breathing practices where I'm slowing down my breathing, or where I'm creating holy water. Every time I drink, I'm creating holy water.
I love that you called
And
it that, by the way.
yeah, it's just, you can change the structure and charge of the water simply with your love and attention. Um, and then, various meditation practices. I do a lot of research with crystals. I have multiple lifetimes as a crystal scientist, researcher, and I'm continuing that work now. So, my desk is covered in crystals right now. So there's a lot on the metaphysical, spiritual side that I'm doing. But the thing that's helped me the most is just having my wife stay grounded as well. And when I'm freaking out, she's like, you know what? I trust you completely. This is the path. This is the way. And we have to create this future. And it's good to know who you're doing it for. I'm doing it for my kids. I'm doing it for moms. I'm doing it for artists, people that shouldn't be slaving away to pay their bills, people that should be not necessarily charging for their work, but their work is super important. So that's who I think about. And I think about specific people that I know that would benefit from the work that I'm doing. And that helps keep me going.
I love that. I love that you mentioned artists as well. I'm an artist, I feel like. No, I know I am. I am an artist. But I see I know what you mean when you say that. It's like this society has been constructed to only benefit the intellect and the analytical and the logical, when it really, is that bringing us closer to God or not? And I think that the artists are leading the way to God, whereas with the logical, it keeps you in this three-dimensional reality. This
Yep.
is great. I love this
The
conversation.
logic is always limited. And where I try to work from is unlimited possibility. And so you have to travel from the mind to the heart in order to access that unlimited possibility. Because no matter how many things you can think of, ways to solve the problem or ways to create a better world, it's not going to happen from the known. We're going to have to move into the abyss of the unknown and the possibilities of the heart.
Yes. Yes, I love that. Yeah, I heard recently somewhere that uh, the esoteric, the spiritual side of things, is when science can't quantify it, and then it goes into this next layer, or it can be the scientist that is pushing the edge of
Yeah.
the science itself. But yeah, you always go into something outside of yourself, and you have to have faith or go into
Trust yourself.
yeah, go into yes, yes, yes. That's becoming a new meaning for me now. Trust yourself. I love that. This was a great conversation, Derek. I definitely want to do this again with better internet connection. I'm in my parents' house, and my mom is upstairs watching TV, so I think that's part of what's happening right now. She's streaming on Apple TV, and it's stopping the flow of my internet here. So I definitely want to do this again and talk deeper into all this, and maybe have a little bit more of a cleaner conversation. But
Yeah,
I
for
used to
sure.
yeah,
Yeah, it was
definitely.
great spending time with you, and I'm glad we got to connect. And yeah, anytime.
So I'd like to leave the last word for the interviewee. So this is a last question here. If you're standing in front of millions of people and you have only 2 minutes to leave them with something, what would you say?
I have 2 minutes for a last word. Well, I mean, we really we just talked about all the good stuff, the way of the heart. I've been apprenticing under this shaman for a few years now, and he says the end of the path is when you die, right, in this lifetime. And so you might as well walk a path with heart so that you enjoy the walking. And there's something about that familiarity with your own death that is very liberating, because it's like the bigger picture here is not what I'm doing now, but it's like, what am I getting from this lifetime in terms of experiences and contribution and lessons and things like that. And then it's really, for the evolution of the soul, it's the aggregate of all the lifetimes and all the lessons. So then there's not so much pressure on one thing or another. And I also, I've spent a lot of time looking into the contracts and agreements of what we are signing up to experience. And so if I'm going through a challenge, then I can only assume that I've placed it here for my own benefit, and that it's leading to some sort of miracle. And when you can view everything as a miracle unfolding, then it's not so, like, you can ride out the ups and downs of it a little bit more easily.
I love that last piece. Things are happening for me, not to me, right? It's all
Hmm.
information, it's all reverberation, feedback, so that I can move to the next step. Love it. Thank you so much, Derek. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate you and your time. And if you guys want to connect with Derek, what is your social, your Instagram account for people to look you up?
Oh, sure. DerekLoudermilk.com is the website, and the Derek Loudermilk Show is the podcast and YouTube channel.
Perfect. Awesome. Love
Thanks.
it. Thank you so much, Derek. And thank you all for watching. And last but not least, always remember, gamify your abundance. Love you guys.